Alright, so a quick explanation of what this game is gonna kind of be like. There's gonna be a dungeon in the middle of the map, which players can go into and they can explore and defeat monsters. And when they defeat these monsters, they'll get new materials. And these materials they then will bring back to their tycoon. And they can be used in order to expand their tycoon, which will in some way allow them to get more and better materials. The first issue I'm going to work on is going to be the enemies, since they're going to need to walk around, follow the player, take damage, do damage, and all that. The way I decided to do this is I made a table on the server side, and then I loop through this table and basically do all the movement, aggro checks, all that. And then I go and I create a new table which has vector 2 and 16s, as I only really need the X and Y positions when I send them to the client. And I basically just only send what the client needs to see. And I send this every 10th of a second to the client, who then, once they receive this information, they will go and say, okay, if this is anywhere near me, I'll create a dummy so that they can visualize the information and show that information. If there already is one, then change stuff on that dummy, etc. Another thing I wanted to mention in the enemies creation is the collisions. Because they're only really a table on the server, it was pretty hard to figure out how to do collisions on them. What I decided to do is I had parts in a collision folder in the workspace, and I casted a ray from where the enemy is towards where they're going, and using this I could figure out how far away an enemy was from the object they're going to collide with. And because the way in which I do the movement on the server is just a vector 3 for the direction, and then the magnitude is how far they go, I just clamp the magnitude of how far they go to how farther it is from the nearest wall, so they'll never walk farther than it is to the nearest wall. As for the finding who to aggro on and if you can if the enemy can hit an enemy player, I took kind of an interesting approach in that I actually made the client check for if it's possible. In that I went, if the enemy is within a certain range of the player, then the player puts them in the table to tell the server, hey, I'm in aggro range. And then it also does the same thing for if they're in hit range. And then the server would then sanity check this and say, hey, is that possible? And if it is, then okay, yeah, you're good. Put aggro on them or try and do a hit. The reason I did this is I'm not that concerned with cheaters, and I think this is a lot better for performance. Since I already have a lot going on the server, doing all these checks for each individual NPC would kind of take away from me being able to make a lot of them at once. Alright, well, that's pretty much the end of this first devlog, so like, subscribe, and if you want to see another one of these.